You're listening to Scalay Sisters, episode number 80. Welcome to Scalay Sisters, the podcast for the classical homeschooling mama who seeks to learn and grow while she's helping her children learn and grow. Scalay Sisters is a casual conversation about topics that matter to those of us in the trenches of classical homeschooling who yearn for something more than just checking boxes and getting it all done. I'm your host, Brandy Wenzel. You can find me over at afterthoughtsblog.net, spreading my Charlotte Mason joy through blog posts, study guides, audios, and more. My co-hosts today are Pam Barnhill, Abby Wall, and Mystie Winkler. Pam is a speaker, podcaster, blogger at pambarnhill.com, and author of two fabulous books, Better Together and Plan Your Year. Abby is basically the queen of the Scalay Sisters sistership. Abby is a country-living farmer rancher, a loving wife, and mom of 5 who homeschools and reads whenever she can. Mystie is a second-generation homeschooler with 5 kids and too many projects. With her blog, podcast, and membership, she helps you organize your attitude so you can organize your life. Find her over at simplyconvivial.com. Have you joined the Scalay Sistership yet? If not, you really should, since the annual Christmas gift for Sophie Level is coming up soon. Santa's elves have been working away, and while I'm not quite ready to tell you what it is, I can tell you that 1, it's nothing at all like last year, and 2, it's pretty awesome. Go to scalaysisters.com/sistership to join. Today's discussion about physical training and classical education was one we got to record when we were all together in Phoenix for the Loving Well retreat. We do get philosophical and discuss why these things are important, but we also get practical and talk about a bunch of ideas that we hope will help you get started if you're ready to get physical. And so, without further ado, let's get to it. Let's start off with our Scalay Everyday. Who'd like to go first?
No one ever wants to go first.
I think Abby should go first because I've seen her book.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Well, I'm Abby. My book is Hallowed Be This House, and it's Finding Signs of Heaven in Your Home by Thomas Howard. And I just started it, but it is great. It just takes you room by room and, well, Mystie, you've already read it, so you probably know more about it than I do because I just started. But it just talks about the household and things like the door, the 4 walls, the bathroom, which should be interesting, and the bedroom, so we'll see. But it's the Peter Kreeft, how do we say that? Kreeft. There we go. Sorry. He wrote the foreword, and he had just lovely things to say about Thomas Howard. He even calls him Thomas Chrysostom, right? I think that's what he calls him as a nickname.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's the golden speaker.
Yeah. Yep. Thomas the Golden Tongued. Is what he says.
Wow.
So that's how Peter Kreeft introduces him. So
It's a really good book because it's kind of what each of those rooms represents in your family. Mm-hmm. Or a family is a home. And these are the different pieces or the roles that it fulfills. It's really good. And fun piece of trivia. Thomas Howard is Elizabeth Elliot's brother. So,
Cool.
fun fact.
Yeah. Can I go?
Go.
only if you have some fun facts.
Well, I don't have any fun facts, and I feel like I don't have that great of a Scalay every day, so I kind of want to just be done. So, okay, I'm Brandy, and mine is Promessi Sposi, I think is how you say it, by Alessandro Manzoni. So it's translated from Italian. So this is assigned for AO, and when my oldest was in his sophomore year, I read like 75% of this book, and I loved it. But it was one of those things where I got crunched for pre-reading at the end of the year, and that was what I dropped because he didn't need my assistance in that book the way he did with other things. Mm-hmm. And I kept promising myself I will pick it back up, Here we are. He's now in college, haven't finished the book, but now my next student has started the book. And I thought I wasn't going to have any pre-reading this year, and then when I wrote her plans, I ended up with pre-reading, but it's not tons of pre-reading. It's like maybe an hour a week. It's not like what I was doing before. She's reading the book, And then I thought, you know what, this is a good opportunity. I don't have tons of pre-reading to just try to keep up with her. And then by the end of the year, I will have actually finished because I've always wondered what happened. So Promisi Sposi, translated into English, means the betrothed. And it's this whole like thing where I can't remember what they're called, like vicaros or something, but it's like basically there's these bullies in the neighborhood that are forbidding this couple that's engaged to get married. And so this guy has come down off of his little fortress in the mountain and threatened all the priests. So the priests won't perform the marriage ceremony because they're afraid of this guy. And so it's how they sort it out. And all these things happen, like historically, like there's a strike, there's all these hardships. And I don't know if they get to get married. Like I haven't read that part of the book. So I would like to know whether they get married. And so I'm reading it, but it's super good. And it's fiction and it's historical fiction. But it's literature. Like it's super well written. It's very beautiful. And so I'm enjoying it.
Fun.
It's good. So
I'll put that on my list. I want to read more literature, fiction.
Promisi Sposi.
All right, well, this is Mystie. And I am going to share about On Christian Teaching by St. Augustine or Augustine.
We say it both ways.
We say it both ways. This book usually goes by its Latin title, which is, I'm just trying to make sure I get it right, and I'm not seeing it. De Doctrina Christiana.
Yeah.
So it's often translated as On Christian Doctrine, but the book is about teaching Christian doctrine. It's not a treatise on doctrine. It doesn't tell you doctrine. It tells you how to come to find or know doctrine. And it's how to become an educated Christian.
Okay.
So it's Augustine. He has all of the Greek and Roman learning that he comes to the table with, and he is trying to teach and train other monks for how to read, and all clergy and whoever comes to them for teaching so that they can then pass it on to their parishioners. But how do you understand and properly teach what the Bible is teaching? How you understand what it's saying and communicate it clearly. So there's literacy understanding side and a communication rhetoric teaching side. And it's really short and very jam-packed.
Cool.
And I'm quoting it several times in my retreat talk this year.
Nice.
So, and I think actually Karen mentioned she is too.
Nice.
I might be too.
That's fun. It's like the book of the retreat.
Yeah.
Fun. So I want to read this line because I think Brandy's going to appreciate it. This is the first sentence from book 1. So he starts off this book with, there are 2 things on which all interpretation of Scripture depends. The process of discovering what we need to learn and the process of presenting what we have learned. It's narration.
He is my narration man, I'm telling you. He really is.
So Charlotte Mason didn't make that up, just saying.
Nope. That's why it's in the Magistro. He has his son do a full narration in that book, and it's so good. It's like the most perfect narration you've ever seen, which makes me think it was invented by him. But anyway, like how Plato kind of, embellished some of Socrates. Anyway, I'm not saying he was lying. I'm just saying he was presenting the idea.
An ideal type.
An ideal type. Yeah, exactly.
There you go. All right. So I highly recommend it. And I got the Oxford World Classics edition, and it's been a very readable translation. So I think I always like to know what translators people are using.
Yeah.
Good call.
Okay, I'm Pam, and I am reading Ron Chernow's Hamilton.
I've heard good things about that.
It is an extremely readable biography. Like, you think you're going to pick up this 800-page biography, which I'm reading it on Kindle. Like, as soon as I saw the number of pages, I'm like, no.
You didn't want an arm workout while you're reading?
No. And not to mention the fact that when you reach a certain age, the beautiful thing about the Kindle is you can make the font as large as you want it to be.
What age is that exactly?
I'm reading it, and it's really readable. I'm really enjoying it. Some of his takes, and he definitely kind of has an axe to grind with Jefferson and Madison. They're not his favorite founding fathers, But it really is so readable. He has another one on Washington, and I think I'm going to move to that one when this one. Well, I may have to take a little break and do something a little bit different. You can only handle so many pages of Revolutionary War and Founding Fathers before.
That is the truth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm enjoying it so much.
Cool.
So it's just like I pick it up in the evening before bed or something, and it just keeps me reading. So cool. I don't want to put it down.
We are going to transition now to the topical discussion. So, what would we call this? Like, physical training is not extracurricular?
Where Abby makes us feel bad? That's what I'm calling it.
That's like the subtitle. It's not the official title, but definitely we all feel guilty being in the room with Abby at this point on this topic.
Let's get physical.
Somebody just won the podcast. So, thank you, Abby.
It's always some titles with us, Brandy, right?
That's right. Oh, I did not bring my copy of Liberal Arts Tradition, but you have it, so I could just snag it from you for if I can remember where this is. Okay, so I said it's not extracurricular because that is what Clark and Jane say in Liberal Arts Tradition, and that was part... I can't remember who brought up. I think it was you, Pam.
It was Pam.
Pam actually brought up this topic.
Pam opened the can of worms.
She did.
I did.
And she doesn't even want to talk about this, and yet she said she wanted to talk about it.
Well, it's something that I think is important, and it's someplace that I think my own education was in deficit.
Yes.
And so.
All right. So Kevin Clark and Ravi Jain in the gymnastics section of Liberal Arts Tradition, which in the new edition is page 28. So they said, although modern schools invest considerable energies and resources into athletics and physical education, they do not do so from the same vision for education or indeed of human flourishing as Christian classical schools. As such, physical education is often included as an appendage to the curriculum, the tags extracurricular or co-curricular, serving to make this point obvious. So they're saying that Christian classical schools will include physical training as part of the curriculum instead of an extracurricular activity. Like they actually view it differently. I loved what they were saying here because they basically go on and they say, if you believe, like the Christian fathers did, that we are body and soul combined, we're a unity, then that has import for the curriculum for physical training and not just for mental training, because we're not just minds. And I love what he said. He quotes Aristotle and he says, he references Aristotle and he says, with respect to courage, for example, thinkers such as Aristotle think it axiomatic that a man with an undisciplined body would find it difficult to be brave. So the idea is that if you're a unity, then there's an interaction between your physical training and your mental training, and they actually support each other, influence each other. And when you're building virtue in one, it should be crossing over, at least to some extent, into that other aspect of your life. So that I think is kind of what was in the podcast that you were listening to. Yeah. So this was inspired by an episode that Pam listened to. You want to
take it away, Pam?
I don't have my phone with me.
Oh, no.
Of the Renovo podcast.
Yes, and that's actually, I have a link right here.
Okay.
If you want me to click on it, do you want me to click on it?
You can if you want to, yeah.
Catholic Fitness. Their show notes are terrible.
They're horrible. Yep.
That's it. Your body and soul, period.
Yeah, and that was the idea that got me to thinking about it when I was listening to this episode of the podcast back in January, is that we work so hard to educate the soul, the mind, when it comes to like homeschooling and education, but we don't necessarily make the physical education part an equal part of, you were saying that about the courageous man. I was thinking about kind of muscle memory. We have to have that muscle memory, just like we have to have kind of that mental.
True.
We internalize things mentally in our education that we're going to then bring back and use one day. But we also have to have kind of that physical muscle memory as well. And to get that, we have to exercise it regularly.
Right.
When I think about my education or my view of fitness has always been, well, how's this going to make me look?
Right. Or feel. Sometimes you go one step further and you're like, maybe health.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe health.
If you feel very virtuous.
Right.
Maybe
Yes,
I'm
yes.
actually doing this so I can be healthy
Right.
and
Right.
look good.
Right. But, I mean, when you think about your body being a temple of the Holy Spirit,
Right.
we want to have a better temple. I mean, right now I'm feeling like my temple's a little kind of run down and in need of a bit of a facelift. Not because of the way it looks, but because it's
Right.
not a very good temple. It's not
Not
a very
serviceable.
strong. Yeah, it's not a very serviceable temple. Yeah.
I love that word. That reminds me of some of the things Charlotte Mason says about physical training, because she talks about the training of heroes. So she kicks us all the way back to the Greeks, and the Greek ideal was that you were training, like the physical training, so that they could perform heroics in war, and they could defend the state, and they could defend their fellow man, and all this stuff. And she was saying, they were in the dark. They didn't know Christ, and yet here they were with this, the highest ideal, that their health was for the purpose of serving others. And she was like, how much more us who have the light of Christ, how much more should we be able to view physical training as fitting us to serve the Lord? And what I love is that she's saying that as someone who has a heart condition, cannot exercise a lot, but she always did what she could to make her body as serviceable for others as she could. So she even did it within her own physical limitations, which I find admirable. She didn't just quit because,
Right.
unhealthy.
I'm off the hook for this one.
Right.
And in all of these cases, the health is not for yourself.
Right.
You have it so that you can use it for others, which really a lot of the health or fitness, if it's not about how you look, it's still about you. How you want to be the best you could be. It's directed back to yourself.
Or for
Instead
kids,
of-
it's money. It's the scholarships. I want to do this
true.
so that I
Yeah.
can get money so that I can go to this school and they'll pay me to go there. And
It's really hard to find sports that aren't directed toward that end that you can
right.
get into for
Which
kids.
may be something we need to discuss at some point.
Well, or there are sports, but they are skewed in a different direction, and mediocrity and participation awards.
Right.
So we're not doing it for virtue or excellence. It's just because you couldn't make the actual team because they've gotten too competitive and too specialized and too professionalized. They've put it on a pedestal. They have put it as an idol, right? This all-consuming goal of getting to a professional athletic career, right? It becomes that. Or the other side is, well, just play for fun because I know that you need exercise and these kids are hating it and they don't want to do it. And
to make exercise fun.
or make it a punishment almost because some of these kids are not out there doing things that they enjoy. Health is such an issue because there is so much baggage that we bring along with it. And with modern thoughts on body image and all of these different things, it just becomes this gigantic mess that you can't talk about without offending people. And what it really needs to be is there are things that you can do physically to glorify God, and you can enjoy them as well. Exercise does not need to be a punishment or terrible. There are so many things, especially in our modern society, where we can do it that's enjoyable. And it does train us because, when you love something, when you enjoy doing something, it's always more fun. It's always, you have a better attitude about it. And if you just say you hate it all the time, that's not doing anyone any good. And that's not training in virtue, right? Hard work does not need to be something that we hate. We can dislike it in the moment, but then at the end of it, we need to be, it should be building us up. Like, I did a hard thing. I hiked that mountain. I ran, right?
No discipline is pleasant at the time. But after
Yes.
yields
I'm
the
still not
peaceable
going
fruit.
hiking with you tomorrow.
Well, in Dr. Kaczynski's Material Logic book, isn't that what we call the instrumental good? It's the good that you don't necessarily experience as desirable in the moment. But it, like he talks about, for example, going to the dentist to getting a tooth pulled, right? You have this problem. The good you're seeking is getting rid of that pain. But you have to go through the process of going to the dentist, which everybody hates to do, and then getting these to be done. But that's the instrumental good. It's the good that gets you to the other good. And I think that's what you're like, I think that's really what that verse is embodying, this idea that there's an instrumental good. So we do the thing that's hard in order to get to the fruit that we're looking for, the other good, the desirable good.
Well, and the thing about exercise is in our very instant gratification society, we want to look better after we worked out once. Right? We don't actually want...
I see that hand.
We don't actually want to go 6 days a week to the gym or what, right? Like those people are obsessive. Those people are just obsessed with their bodies and everything like that.
And some of them are.
And some of them are.
Some of them are, right.
Some of them are. And other people go to the gym and they're not really working out either. They're going for a virtue of, well, I am healthy because I go to the gym, right? Like they're doing it for that reason too.
Or even some gyms are like a substitute.
Yeah.
Well, and some gyms are like a substitute for church. Like you get those things that that is where you built your community. That's where your social environment is. Like some gyms are really tight knit, but they're actually replacing something else in your life that you're supposed to have somewhere else.
Yes.
So we have the situation where Christian parents who are trying to give their children a good classical education are stuck in this world where you have over-professionalization, emphasis on all the wrong thing on one hand, and then you have mediocrity. This is just for the purpose of you having fun. Overemphasis on all the wrong things, but in a different way than option A. And we're all supposed to navigate this world and somehow try to do a good job because physical education is not extracurricular.
Or you have parents who they themselves do not have any competence or confidence in teaching their kids, and there aren't good options, right?
Teaching their kids exercise.
Teaching their kids exercise or getting physical with them, or maybe they even have health things
issues,
and so they are not able to model it, or they just don't know where. So, where do you start and where do you begin? And
so you have answers to those questions.
I think we start, I know you have a lot of answers, but I think we have to start with why we're doing it. Mm-hmm. So we already said, when we have our 4 causes, we were talking about this today, right? We have our first and final cause. You are a unity of body and soul, therefore this matters. You have a body, so it is designed for something. And our final cause was it's designed for service. So we want to get to this point where you can serve as best as you can. Because we do have, some of us have kids with real issues, right? You might have a child that's diabetic, asthmatic, whatever. So we have to get them to the point where they can serve as much as is possible for them. So then the question is, what do you do? How do you navigate this? I'm looking at you, Abby.
Oh, okay.
We're all looking at you, Abby.
Yeah. So I did go through Dr. Kozinski's book, and I did this as an exercise to just try to figure out all the different causes. So the gymnastic word is actually that it was naked. So all your so just right there, you should all be thankful that you were not in ancient Greek society where you had to show your naked body while you were exercising. So
it was only the boys anyway.
Yeah, it was only the boys anyway. Yes, this is true. But
I will say something interesting about that though. That okay, so I don't think we should be exercising naked, but when I was in ballet, the best studio in town, you had to wear a leotard and tights, no skirt.
Right.
Because they were making sure that you were doing it perfectly.
They were making sure you were turned out from the hip and not from the knee. Because if you were
covered, they actually couldn't see that you weren't compensating with the wrong muscles in some way. So it was actually a way of making sure that you were perfect.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they produced the best dancers in town. They also produced the most eating disorders in town. So I'm not saying this was necessarily a good thing, but I'm just saying I can see why they did. After I realized what they were doing and how they were getting to perfection, I kind of recognize why the nakedness.
Well, and it's not even just perfection. And I don't know anything about this.
Well, in a virtue sense, the perfect technique.
But it's also lacking injury.
Absolutely. That's a good point.
So in my gym, there are no mirrors. So in a lot of gyms, they're covered wall to wall with mirrors. And the reason for this is because of actual body awareness. Instead of looking at yourself and being vain, it's actually about physically training your body to do the movements correctly. There are people there teaching you how to do these things correctly and safely. But when you are doing these other things on your own and you do not have that kind of personal training, then you can injure yourself. And mirrors are supposed to help you. But those are also gyms that are more for aesthetics rather than getting stronger being able to have functional movement, to work on skills and strength and conditioning, right? So those are all different things. Gymnastics, the broad sense is a form of training. So I'm just going to go through these. And then the narrow is tumbling, floor, balance beam, Olympic gymnastics. Like these are very skilled and trained things. And so he went through these exercises. And so it could be a physical mastery over a multi-dimensional physical apparatus. Like that's the very specific to obscure. That's what they were talking about.
Wait,
Gymnastic.
I don't know. Explain that. What does that mean?
What?
So like you were talking about gymnastics and that's getting it like super obscure. He was talking about going all these different causes. Like these are all different causes. We can cut that out. But I was just going through all the different levels because he had like 20 different definitions.
Right. That's right.
All these.
Which that was from Peter Kreft's book that he was
that's
using,
from Peter
right?
Kreft's. Yeah. So anyway, and it goes through all these different things. The final cause, we were talking about the unity, right? And you guys were saying it's unity of body and soul. And so it's also what is good for the body is also good for the soul. These are the things. The purpose or the use of one's body is central to the moral and spiritual life. So the efficient cause would be the disciplined physical training. Physical discipline produces that self-control, while perseverance through difficult activities produces patience and creates habits of hard work and attaining goals and virtues, right? So these are all things that are all linked. So you guys what are our examples or?
We do need to get into the what too. So what do we do? We exist. This is the world we live in.
Yeah.
So it's imperfect. It has its problems on all these different levels. So then what are we all supposed to do? How do we make sure our kids get physical training without falling off into one of these ditches?
2 ditches.
One of these 2. Or there's probably other ditches too that we haven't even identified.
Yeah.
How do we navigate the middle way
especially when you don't feel competent to do so?
Yeah.
Right.
Because now PE at my house is, I will say my kids take a couple of classes.
Right.
Like, we have one that's in karate. We have 2 that actually go to the gymnastic studio. We have one that does dance. And it's all for the movement of the body. I mean, they do it because they enjoy it.
Yep. Right.
But I have them do it. I pay for it.
Right.
So that they're moving their bodies. But other than that, it's, okay, go outside and walk the dog around the block. And so
that's one of the things that interests me is the difference between the competitive team sports and the dance, gymnastics, and karate are more about self-controlled movement.
Right.
Doing particular movements for a particular purpose, putting them together in a very self-controlled way. Mm-hmm. And I do think from liberal arts tradition, and I forget where else I was reading, but the Greek model included mostly the gymnastic, that personal self-control of body. Mm-hmm. And then also we get the Olympics from them. Like they were very competitive.
They were competitive, but
not
were there Olympic activities, team activities? That would be interesting.
They wanted heroes, which are particular
but
individuals.
It seemed to be individual heroes and not necessarily. That would be interesting to look into is where did the development of team sports come and how did it become, even now? I mean, so much of our Olympics has been inundated with team events as opposed to just individual events. When did the rise of team sports come and how did that replace kind of individual sports?
The Greeks had their armies trained to march in formation, fight in certain way. I mean, so there was definitely
their team was their army,
right? Yeah, and there was definitely teamwork. Like you really can't read Plutarch and come away thinking that it was all individual.
No,
but where did team sports come in?
But was the gymnastic stuff team stuff, or was the training of the body all about individual bodies?
But that would be interesting to know. Like in wrestling, for example, did they ever do like 3-on-3, like where you were trying to defeat another? I mean, I don't know.
They still do Greek wrestling.
They still do Greco-Roman wrestling.
And it's all individuals?
It's the same as
Awesome.
Yeah, and they do weight classes, so it's teams, but
are
it's
they
your
naked?
own.
I'm
no,
just kidding. No.
Singlets don't cover much. Yeah. So and there's different styles of the Greco-Roman, but it's still fairly traditional.
Yeah.
All team sports, they're playing together is always If you have a runaway individual that is a ball hog or the superstar and it messes with it, some of the most successful teams, they never allowed that to happen.
I think there are lessons to be learned from team sport, I don't think that they're necessarily gymnastics training.
What the gymnastics component of the liberal arts
exactly
tradition is talking about.
Well, I think if we think of it as like the raising of heroes, fitting the body for service, if we ask that question, I mean, because I remember coming across that in Charlotte Mason when my kids were really young. And so I remember thinking, well, heroes usually can swim. When you think about just everyday heroes, lots of times it's like, well, so-and-so saved me from drowning. So we put our kids in swimming lessons. And I actually remember, like, it was a conscious thing. We're going to put our kids in swimming lesson because heroes can swim. That's why. And we had one of them, I don't want to say saved from drowning like it was so dramatic, but one of them had been pulled out of the water after, going under or whatever. And so we had experienced someone helping our child who couldn't swim not die, which was nice. But I'm thinking, like, when we start to ask those kinds of questions and talk about fitting the body for service, then we start thinking in terms of stamina, strength, endurance, and there's a lot of ways to build those things. It doesn't have to be one thing, and it can be what's accessible for our families. Like, if you live somewhere with hills, there's certain types of endurance that you can build that I can't build in flatland where I live, because there are no hills. They could walk all day and not find a hill.
This makes me think you were talking about missionaries recently who were training to go into the mission field.
That's right.
And the kinds of things that they had to do to get prepared for that.
Right.
And so
they're learning to live in a tent, build a shelter. They had to learn to build a shelter, how to carry in a pack that's like 60 pounds with their children, even newborns, and set up a camp. Live there off the land without any assistance, without any other human contact for, 3 weeks. They're learning to slaughter animals because they're going to have to live and preserve food without refrigeration. And all of those things are because that's the life they're going to have to live if they go to some remote area to go translate the Bible, which is what they intend to do.
So it's a lot more than just an intellectual language job, which we tend to separate those two.
But there's a lot of functional strength involved.
And I hadn't even thought about
training
that they were
for the
going to
mission
do
field.
that. Yeah. Well, and I think, actually, if I remember right, Radius is a missions training organization that our church founded. And I'm pretty sure they talked about one of the things they're doing during the year that they're there. They're accountable for their physical fitness because they have to be fit to go to the locations that they're going to.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I hadn't really thought about. Like, I was thinking more like, you're going to translate the Bible, so you need to have all this linguistics. Like, I was thinking mind.
Right.
And they're thinking whole person.
I love the way you phrased that with they had to be fit for the service. And I think that's where the final cause of gymnastic comes in, is not that we throw around the word fit, like I want to be healthy and active and strong. And it's about our state instead of like being fitted for our abilities are appropriate and adequate for the jobs that we're responsible to perform.
Mystie, I don't know if you remember this, but years ago, I remember you using that language when you were talking about getting your steps. And I remember someone, I can't remember, in some conversation on Voxer or something, someone was like, well, you could just lower your step count for a while. And I remember you saying, no, my sister's wedding is in such and such amount of time. And if I don't get my stamina up, I'm not going to be able to do what I have to do for her wedding. And you used the word fitness. And I remember that was the first time my brain connected fitness with being fit for your vocation. Like what were you called to do? Well, you were hosting her wedding. So in that moment, you were called to do this certain thing and you needed to be fit for that. It just had.
I probably also wanted to fit into a certain dress by the wedding.
Other kind of fitness.
I wanted my dress to fit. but let's be more virtuous than that.
Abby, your face is priceless.
So. Yeah, being fit for service. So every year we take off school for lambing and we roll right into 12, 14-hour days. I mean, we take breaks for lunch and dinner, but I'm up early and we are out in the barns physically running around, setting things up, moving 60 to 75-pound bales of straw, carrying buckets, right? Like, this is actual physically demanding work, and it's required every year because that's what needs to happen.
Life on a farm.
And I take the month off of the gym, but my husband and I have talked about it. He's like, nope, you were totally ready for it. This, you were in way better shape. By the end of it, he's fine. But, he's coming off the slower winter months. And then it's like hit the ground running. And my family, we do run 2 things. Chasing sheep, herding them, and it's a very physically demanding job, and you have to be ready for that. My kids, they are sore the first couple days, they are bone tired, but they all have wonderful stories. It is formational. They see the purpose and they see, the physical demands it's required of them. And yes, sometimes they complain, but they know, they get to pull lambs out and they get to see the birth and they see all these things, and it is a very physically demanding and yet very rewarding. Most of us, even when we don't like exercising, after we do it, we enjoy it, right? Like, unless you've seriously injured yourself, there is usually no downsides, right? Like, oh, I really wish I wouldn't have gone on that walk today. It says no one ever. So I think that, it's hard to talk yourself into it, but once you're going, it's not so bad, right? But think about your Pam's go over here giving me faces, but you love to dance, right?
Yes.
Tap, right?
I like tap dancing.
Or dance, right? Yeah. And do you ever, like, maybe not going is, you're like, oh, I don't really want to go tonight. But once you are done with it, because you really enjoy it, and it's a form of exercise that you actually love to do, right?
Yeah.
But it is exercise.
I used to get up at 6 a.m. every Sunday to go ice dance.
Wow.
Yeah, for a couple of years.
Wow.
And it was, did I want to roll out of bed and get up and be at the ice rink at 6 a.m.? No, I didn't, but I was never sorry that I went. Yeah, even when I fell.
Aww.
So, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's like when you're done with it, it's always the getting into it that's the hardest part. But when you're done with it, and I do think some of this is chemical. There's endorphins or something.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not going to
Runner's
say it's,
high.
Yeah. Or
ice dance.
brisk walker's high.
I don't think that's a thing.
But you're right. You don't. I was just thinking as Brandy was talking about being fit for your vocation that I was really glad that I didn't have to be fit for Abby's vocation.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I wonder, so part of the gymnastic idea is being an essential part of a classical education is that the intellectual and spiritual and material parts of us are way more connected than we think of them in the modern era. So it's kind of, it's reclaiming that ancient and medieval understanding that the material and intellectual and spiritual are all very interconnected. So having that experience of pushing through something being difficult but worth it translates to things that are mentally, intellectually difficult.
Or morally.
Vice versa.
Or morally.
Yeah.
Right.
I often think about isn't it Paul who talks about I discipline my body and I make it my slave. And I was thinking about, that's not just required for some sort of physical fitness thing. Like you discipline your body and make it your slave when you tell it not to lie, not to steal, to do the right thing, to go do this thing you don't want to do, but you ought to do. All of that is a form of disciplining your body and making it your slave too. If we've never practiced that, like sometimes the way we practice that is, you're on a basketball team and your coach makes you run lines again.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So you went and run lines again because he told you to, even though you didn't want to, because you're disciplining your body and making it do what you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are lots of exercises I don't actually enjoy. So, contrary to popular belief, there are things I don't enjoy.
So you're not a stereotype.
No. In fact, I really dislike running, and the erg or the rowing machine is my nemesis, and I make myself do it. I did row at college for a couple years, and so sitting on an erg is the last thing I ever want to do after a back-to-back 10Ks. So,
wow.
I don't love it. And I don't like treadmills either. So, but when I am running, I decided that it was a great time to pray because then I got my mind off of how terrible it was to be running and how I didn't want to be doing it anymore and whining and complaining. And then I just started praying for people. And that really does help me. And it's that perseverance that is The physical discipline, I know I need because one, it does make me feel better. Two, I want to have a long and healthy life. This isn't so that I can be serviceable for a long time. I want to see my grandchildren. I want to hopefully see my great-grandchildren.
Be able to pick them up.
I don't want my kids to have to either get me a nurse or some sort of thing. Healthy people usually stay fairly healthy, and you can maintain if you are doing things. So it is one of those things that the long view is a great way to do it, because immediately it doesn't seem like it's doing much, right? So it's the long view of it. So it becomes a mental discipline as well as a physical discipline, and it can be a spiritual discipline. And it's not because I'm spiritualizing. It's just because I really need to focus on something else besides my pain and suffering, because it's really I'm doing it to myself. I'm choosing to be there.
Yeah. Well, and that was one of the things that the podcast talked about, was turning off podcasts, turning off audiobooks, and just kind of being in that moment of exercising and focusing on the exercise. I think about Mystie's walks that she does where she's noticing the things around her. You know, we have a phrase in Catholicism, offering it up. So, you know, you get into that, and this is what I'm doing. I'm offering this up as I'm going through my exercising and things. And so I started doing that after listening to the podcast, bringing the Holy Spirit into helping me get up that hill.
Nice. Amen.
That's returning to an idea of all of these parts of us being interconnected instead of having separate boxes and we have to check this box and then check this box and then check this box. That they actually feed into one another and are all in play. Whichever one is forefront, the others are very close. They're not very far.
Okay, do you think that there's a difference because of the emphasis on Jesus is in my heart, rather than your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit? Because
interesting.
The sentiment versus the actual the dwelling place, right? I was just thinking of even the tabernacle is your heart, and it's okay, but
it's actually your whole body.
It's your whole body, and
not your feelings.
So it's a little bit Gnostic, you think?
Maybe. But I'm just asking. Yeah. I've been reading through Exodus, and they're talking about building the tabernacle and how many details and all these different things, all the details, all the different threads and, all these different things and all of their wealth and all of their beautiful things, and how beauty was important. It's not just aesthetically beautiful. It's because it is important. It is the important. And our bodies are important. There's often God loves me just as I am. Yes. And
doesn't leave you where you are.
But are we stewarding what he has given us, right? I'm sure that the tabernacle would have got real shabby if they weren't carefully maintaining and taking care of it and things like that, right? Or if they were just, not doing what they were supposed to do, right? If they were being lazy, or
that gold probably needed to be polished.
Yeah. Probably.
It's true.
Yeah. And keeping things. So,
and that was considered an honor. An honorable job.
Yeah. There is that skew of, you get too selfish or you get too focused, and that's true. But there's also the lack of caring at all. So.
I was thinking, we talk about fit for service, but I'm also wondering about, this is just something my husband and I have talked about recently, fit for festivity aspect of it. So over summer, our son graduated, which means a lot of his friends graduated. So we're going from party to party, right, over summer. And at least one of them, maybe two, I feel like there was dancing at more than one event. Anyway, our younger children, for whatever reason, they haven't been to weddings, they haven't whatever. So this is their first time that they've really been at something that's for them, that has just social dancing at it. Which means, we've never made sure they knew how. And so, they were fine. I don't think they would have wanted to participate even if they had known how. But it dawned on us, if they're going to participate in festivity, part of that means they need to know
how to dance,
how to participate. And if the things that we're going to include dancing, then they need to know how to do that to some extent. Not that they're all going to be pro dancers. So we just bought the easiest thing, especially since our youngest is a 12-year-old boy and they don't want to do all this, right? So we just bought it was Sean Troutman line dancing lessons. And so they're going through. So they've been learning the electric slide and the Cupid shuffle and just all these basic dances that are like at every wedding in the United States. You know,
For better or for worse.
Whether we like, love them or hate them. These are the dances that people do. And no.
There's dancing at every wedding I've ever been to, and not those ones. I don't know what those are.
Oh, really? Interesting. Okay, so Miss Mindy. Well, I mean that's the thing too.
Yes.
Well, this is not the only ones they're going to be learning, but these are the ones that we started at. But actually, that's interesting because the ones on his list, there was only one I had never done. There were like 7 or 8 on his DVD. And there's only one I had never done. So that's interesting. I wonder if it's like a regional thing.
Well, my husband was homeschooled, and their family did not think that dancing was appropriate.
Okay.
In public. You may need to cut that out. Very conservative, so yeah.
You're mild. Well,
Which my husband considers a deficit. He wishes he would have learned.
Right. Well, and my thing is, it's fit for festivity that you're actually going to participate in. If you're going somewhere where they're doing like old-fashioned ball dancing, that's what you should learn. Like, why would you teach them the electric slide if they're never going to do it? Like,
Right.
Anyway, so we chose these because they're kind of like the gateway junior high dances that they can learn that will get them to other things like the 2-step when they're a little bit older and a little more confident and willing to touch the opposite sex again, because right now they're like, ew, kitties. So that's another aspect maybe of physical training that we don't often consider. Like I know Charlotte Mason, they did their Swedish drill and they also did their folk dancing. And so they were learning to do both.
Yeah, we did square dancing at co-op. Not that they're going to get an opportunity to go out and square dance, but it was just
That's
fun.
a good experience.
You know?
Well, I don't know anybody who has done square dancing and hates it. Like, I feel like that's something that needs to make a comeback.
Yes.
That was in my grade school. We had to do it every single year.
We did too,
K
and I loved
through
it.
5th grade.
And a good color can teach you to square dance in like one night.
And boys, like the boys at my school liked it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm still Facebook friends with my old square dance partners.
That's so cute.
So from 6th grade.
Yeah.
So if we were recording from our homes, this is where I go grab my Great Tradition, which I did not. It was too big to pack.
It is a monster. It's true.
I did not check a bag, but that is, I'm trying to remember if it was, I'm pretty sure it was Play-Doh, but don't quote me on that. There was a section that was a gymnastic section included in Great Tradition. Part of the goal of what they were doing in gymnastic was as a social festivity worship. It was ceremonial and ritual.
Okay.
That they were participating in, that they had to be able to do these dances. And Play-Doh has a section on it needs to be the traditional dances that other generations before them have done, because it puts them in touch with those. They're carrying on this tradition.
So it's almost like a piety piece.
It
was, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that section too.
That was the section that we were reading for.
Near the preschool section.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. So you actually want to be... well, I mean, if you think about that, like I know when we're learning hymns, especially when our kids were really little, we were trying to make sure to attach them to the church. So we were specifically choosing the exact songs they might sing on Sunday.
Yeah.
And the exact versions of those songs they might sing on Sunday. Because who cares if there's some fancy pants version on the radio? That's not what they're going to sing on Sunday. And we wanted to attach them to the church. So I wonder if it's a very similar kind of thing where you're trying to attach them to their community. Mm-hmm. So you need to learn whatever the community's
is doing. So you can participate.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing. A wedding is that same kind of auxiliary ceremony that's socially binding. Mm-hmm. And you want to be able to fully participate.
Right. I like it. And even like to cross it over a little bit, like for example, on one side of my family, there's a big football game in the front yard every year after Thanksgiving dinner. And so our kids learning to throw around a football with their dad was an important part of preparing them just to participate on Thanksgiving, and this wasn't even like a striving for excellence thing. This was just striving for participation. Yeah. You're able to catch it and run with it and not whine when somebody tackles you. Like that was pretty much the bare minimum requirements.
We've done the same thing with softball. Like my family would play softball.
Okay.
We would get together and do it. And then I was an excellent first baseman. The muscle memory definitely comes back.
Awesome.
My kids were amazed that their mother could move that way.
Nice.
Well, maybe this is where the team sports comes in. This is a community,
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
participation thing.
But so my kids had to learn how to. They didn't know how to hit the ball and throw the ball, and the other family members did. So it was almost like, oh, these little homeschool kids have never done that.
You were socializing them.
But we have gotten out in the yard and pitched the ball to them and thrown back and forth and things like that, just to make sure that they were able to do that and participate.
Well, and I
in that
love
way.
this too because it's a good example of being fit for your own community. Because you throwing around a football isn't going to help on Thanksgiving Day, and me throwing around a softball isn't going to help my kids on Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're fitting them for what your community is actually going to do.
Yeah.
Well, and it helps us design, if we're going to talk about curriculum, it helps us design what to actually do. Because if we're thinking about fit for service and then fit for festivity, then it helps dictate, like, what are the best, you can't do everything. So what are the best things to do? Well, we're starting with, this is what you might actually run across in your life, you know? So like we talk about the swimming, heroism, it's also participatory. We live in California. Everybody can swim. Like if your kids can't swim, you're left out of all sorts of things.
Yeah, we're very close to Florida
Right.
and have pools. And so, that's a skill that they have to have.
Yeah. Well, we face this. Like immigrants will come from countries where it's just like culturally, women don't swim. And the little girls, they get left out of social events. Don't invite her, she can't swim. I mean, you know, it's very sad, but it's like part of their acculturation. The culture they came with has to allow them to swim in order to fully participate in the community
that they moved into.
Right. You know, there's all sorts of issues that come into the physical training, but it's true. If your kids can't do what everybody's doing, they can't participate in the community.
Well, and I think we need to go back to some of the stuff that we were talking about earlier with the connection between physical and mental in learning.
Yep. Yeah, my kids probably, if they were in a public school setting, would be medicated because they don't ever stop moving. Like when they're reading, when they're writing, I mean, they just cannot stop moving. And the idea that, you know, they don't want to push through on intellectual things because of some of the difficulties, but I can see how they are totally physically capable of doing these amazingly hard feats. And so we will often link it back to that. Like, well, remember when you did that? It's just like this, but that's for your brain.
Nice.
Right. So we know that they can do difficult and challenging things. Like maybe your child is the opposite, right? I know that you just read an 800-page book. So I am fairly confident that you can run a mile. Right?
Nice.
Because I know that you are mentally can persevere through this, even though it was a tough book, and you can do this. So there's still a mental component no matter what. And I liked the one you said, making your body a slave.
Yeah.
Right? Not being discouraged by the time it takes you, but to persevere. When COVID hit, all of my neighborhood kids came home. I talked to all my neighborhood families and I said, well, we can do homeschool neighborhood PE. And so every single morning we would go out and Monday morning was our mile run and everybody had to run a mile.
Nice.
And we timed them and we improved over the weeks. These kids did not want to do this. I knew that if I could get other kids there, my kids would have to do it because otherwise they were not likely to just do it for me. We did burpees, we did push-ups, we did obstacle courses. We had a blast.
Nice.
It was communal. It brought them together. It was a mental discipline. And then everyone had to go home and do school. And so it was a great way to start our day already running. My kids probably wouldn't have done it otherwise, right? Now I can get them to kind of do things and it's fine. They'll go with me, but yeah. Even the oldest was buying in, so.
Nice.
There's a sentence, well, there's actually a whole section in Certelange, The Intellectual Life, about how even intellectuals need to take care of their body and exercise and all these things. And so I was looking at this sentence, but it's quite the sentence. So I'm going to paraphrase it. His point is that you use your body to think. Like your brain, there's a lot of material going on in the intellectual activity. So you have to be paying attention to the material part of your being if you want a fully functional intellectual part of your being, because you can't have the intellect without your body. And so he says, in order to think, and especially in order to think ardently and wisely throughout a lifetime, it is indispensable to subject to the requirements of thoughts, not only the soul, but also the body and its organic functions.
Well, if you think about it too, even on a cellular level, when you're exercising, you're breathing and you have to focus on breath. And when your body becomes oxygen rich, your whole body gets more saturated with oxygen. Right. Deep breathing with the diaphragm. If you're just sitting there reading a book, you're not usually doing that unless you're doing it. Exercise forces you to actually do those things. So on a physical level, you actually are activating the blood and the brain, everything. So
I have a child who loves to work out pretty intensely before she does math, which is her hardest subject for her. And she feels like it really turns on her brain enough to try to go down and do her math for that, so she just goes right to it when she's done. And it works for her. For me, I don't work that way, but it works for her.
Certelage also says, so he gives examples of men of genius. And he wants us, like them, to have enough vigor to triumph in the incessant struggle of the soul against the weakness of the flesh.
That's a great thought.
Okay, so real quick before we finish up, I just want to hear 1, 2, 3, however many come to mind. No pressure on number. Your favorite things in this category that you've done with your kids. People are going to want some ideas of what to do if they haven't done anything, or maybe they have little kids and they're just now kind of ready for the next stage. Because when they're little, it's mainly like keep moving, keep them playing, don't let them sit in front of a screen too long. Okay. But now we're in grade school and now we're doing, so
neighborhood PE sounds like a good one.
Neighborhood PE sounds like I
need
nail my
Abby to
kids
come
here.
and teach.
I know, for real.
Taking the kids out and kind of learning some of the rules of the games. I mean, we actually do throw the football around.
Yeah.
But teaching them the softball, like how to hold the bat and swing and basketball. So we have a basketball goal and we do those things. I mean, my husband and I, neither one of us are great players of anything, but we know enough of the rudiments to,
we set up a volleyball net and a badminton net, and that was part of neighborhood PE, is we would do kind of a physical run, and then we would have everybody play a game. And wiffle ball is a great way to do that. Buying a pull-up bar that sits in your door frame is actually they're like $28 on Amazon. They're fabulous, and you can usually get kids every time you walk through, do a chin-up or a pull-up. We have rings in my garage. One of the best games I ever played with my kids is I had to take 5 kids to the grocery store, and you can when you need that many groceries and you have that many kids with you, I would have them everybody jump on the grocery cart, and I would run and push my cart all the way up the hill because I usually parked all the way in the back because I have a giant cart. And so that was our grocery store tradition, and my kids will still do it, and they think it's so funny to see me now struggle to push,
It's like 300 pounds.
I know everyone goes to the grocery store with me anymore.
Okay.
But they do still find it really fun. So if you can, that's one thing is them seeing you actually enjoy it. We would take morning walks all together.
We do a lot of walks.
Yep. And that's a great place to start. But we do have a pull-up bar, and we have Olympic rings. They're just rings, and we have those out too. And my kids love playing on those. Kids are actually they actually enjoy doing those physical things and seeing what they can do. Furniture isn't to be sat on, it's to be used as, a vault, or two chairs to be holding themselves up and lifting their legs. We often did leg lift competitions where we lay on our backs and then you just hold your legs above the ground. And, we would time each other. We would do sit-up competitions. We do how many burpees can you do in 5 minutes. We do a lot of physical things. I often give burpees for anyone, or push-ups, who says literally, because it was being overused and incorrectly. So
I use push-ups in my Plutarch class for kids who forgot their homework.
Okay. Yeah. And sometimes just
or laps if you complain.
Yeah.
I was using laps, and they were like, we love laps. And then some of them wanted to volunteer to go with the kid that was in trouble. And I was like, this obviously isn't a punishment. So I moved to push-ups. They don't like them as much.
I send them out to jump on the trampoline if they can't focus.
Yeah.
Yep. We have a balance board, and oftentimes they will do their reading aloud on that just to stay balanced, or they will do squat competitions. They did that with Mystie's children too.
Oh, is that where they picked it up?
Yeah. Yeah, everything's competitive. Making it fun. I don't believe that all fun at school should be fun, but things that we're going to do for a lifetime need to be enjoyable. And
Well, I think there's a difference between saying, like, I'm going to try to make something fun because I don't think that this, like, I feel like that's often used in school because there's a belief that the thing doesn't have value in and of itself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But learning to enjoy the things that are good and find those things fun is good for us. I should be able to find it fun to read a book, to engage in physical activity, to like whatever it is. Like, it would be better for me to enjoy that thing. I think what you're talking about is different than trying to like gussy something up because you don't think it has value.
Right. Wasn't it you who did the president's physical fitness test?
Yeah, because my kids are in a charter, or some of my kids are in a charter school. It's required by the state. So
was it something that you would have chosen to do otherwise?
I don't think I would have known about it otherwise. Like, it's not really like but I thought it was great for them. And it was exciting for them to see the difference between before they started karate and after they started karate. They maxed out. There's maximums for like how many push-ups, how many sit-ups. And they went from struggling to they maxed out. They were some of the only kids there that did max out. Like, the other kids were maxing out were also like gymnasts and karate. Like, it was mainly those two categories of people. So I think they found it very satisfying to see the difference.
Having something to work towards.
That's true.
Some kinds of goal, and I've been thinking about that. Do I find a 5K, some kind of like turkey trot or something that my kids would find the name fun or something like that and sign us all up for it and give us a goal to work towards. I mean, I know it's its own reward, but sometimes adding something, just something fun into
the Greeks, it was its own reward, but they also had the Olympics.
Right.
So that's something. Mm-hmm. What about you? What have you done?
No,
anything that hasn't been shared?
It's definitely our weakest area for sure. I've thought of a lot of things. Exercise videos. But beyond sending kids out to run and ride bikes and do laps if they talk back.
Don't underestimate that.
We have had children who obviously needed more physical activity than more physical and social. And so we've always been, we're not sports people. We don't do sports. We're fine with that. So this has been a convicting, challenging part of, this is not integrated into our family yet, but I see it. And Yep.
We've done a number of the things that you guys have mentioned. So I thought the thing that I'll bring up that I think maybe is different is, and we've done a lot of martial arts, and this is where we've gotten this, but they've done a lot of self-defense, other defense stuff. So they know how to take a gun from someone. They have certain weapons they know how to use. My daughter fights with 3-pronged sword things called sais, which is like a
Raphael's.
What do you call it? It's not
weapon on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yes, thank you. It is actually.
But they are.
And she does bow staff also, come to think of it. So there were certain things they wanted to do, certain freedoms they wanted, and we made them get to a certain level of self-defense before they were allowed to go do those things. Going to certain parts of town on their bikes or whatever. We don't live in a particularly unsafe neighborhood, but there had been some things that happened that we felt like, but all it takes is one time. It doesn't matter that it's not unsafe. It had happened once, which means it could happen again. So there are all these different things that we've done over the years. So now my older daughter actually teaches her friends how to fight with it. It doesn't even look like a weapon, and I have no idea what it's called. But it's like a little thing that a girl can carry in her pocket that's actually, it's made of steel, and it's actually very versatile.
The telescoping baton?
It's not telescoping. It's I don't even know what it's called. I should ask her. But anyway, so she not only has learned how to defend herself with this thing, she carries it everywhere, but she's actually now started teaching friends and things. I actually think our mentality on this started because there was like a year where there was some sort of bomb threat made against a church in town. And we were just like, well, the kids would know what to do. Like if there had been a shooting at that church in Texas, like if there was a shooting or if there was, do they know what to do? And so we just went through things like, so now they know if you go into like a really crowded room, check for all the exits, know where they are. You only really need to survive for 30 seconds in most shootings, so you need to know what to do. But I feel like that aspect of it actually helped me not be such an overbearing mother. Knowing that they can handle themselves, and they probably can handle themselves better than I can. Like, if I was attacked by someone, I probably wouldn't do as well as most of my kids. Maybe my youngest, only because he's small. Not because he doesn't know what he's doing. And so I felt like that actually really helped me because now I'm not like worried about them. I'm more worried that I can't keep up.
Well, and physical training builds confidence, right? And it's not necessarily arrogance, but just like, I know I can do this.
Right.
I know I can handle this. And confidence in, I don't need to be afraid walking down the street because I can defend myself.
Talk about when people who have injured other people are interviewed, they pick people who do not look confident.
Yeah.
So giving your children confidence where then they actually walk with confidence because they are confident can actually be the first line of defense against the negative act.
They give off the don't mess with me vibe.
Right. Yeah. Like, and my parents taught us that. So I was never as strong as my sister, but I remember one of them telling me, but you should walk like her. You should hold your shoulders back and hold yourself tall and don't be afraid to walk even taller when you're in your high heels. When you're in a parking lot in Los Angeles and you know it's dark and all that, you know, and I do think that was wise advice. So
my oldest signed it wasn't thinking about these things in particular, but my oldest signed up for fencing.
Ooh.
And so he's been doing fencing for about 2 or 3 years now.
That's awesome.
And so he started in the gangly teenage years. And just a few weeks of fencing and the grace with which he, you know, just his bearing and movements just changed.
That's so neat. I love that. I love that. See?
There, I had
You
something.
didn't give yourself enough credit. Well, this has been fun. I'm not going to thank you all for coming because you're not going anywhere.
We're not going anywhere.
So...
That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening and being a part of the sisterhood of the podcast. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. All of the books and things mentioned in today's episode are linked in our show notes. Just go to scolesisters.com/SS80 to check it out. That's SS80. Remember to sign up for the Scole Sistership Sophie Level so you can get in on our amazing Christmas gift. Just go to scolesisters.com/sistership to sign up. In our next episode, Pam and I have a lovely chat with homeschool mom Maria Bell about memory work, recitation, and repetition. We really wanted to have Maria on the show because she will take whatever you've previously thought about memory work and blow it entirely out of the water. You will not want to miss this one. Until then, we want to remind you once again that homeschooling is a marathon you needn't run alone, so open up your eyes and look around you. Find your sisters.
I'm super loud usually, so...
Did you want to say something?
I wanted to say I listened to an episode this other week and I realized we were trying to say our name first before we did our Scole every day. And we stopped doing that. When you started, I realized.
Oh, okay. That was Abby.
Can you start with like, I'm Abby and move it to the beginning?
I could.
I'm Abby.
Good job.